Welcome to Lift Up Your Hearts podcast. This week we're going to hear about Jesus casting out demons. And it seems to be a surprise to the people that he has the power to do it. In this podcast, I invite you to journey with me and pray with me. This is kind of a guided prayer, so it's maybe a space you're going to listen to in the car or when you're in a reflective mode. This is probably not a podcast you're going to watch on your TV or when you're biking or something. But this is meant to show that you can have a deep prayer life, and you don't have to be a biblical scholar. You don't have to be an expert. You might have to, it is helpful to have a good study Bible, but I just encourage you to come along this journey with me and reflect on the Sunday Gospels in an Ignatian style. This is an Ignatian style contemplative prayer, and I'm here to show you how to do it a little bit, but also I'm going to just go through it with you. If you want to learn a lot more about how to do it, I encourage you to read some of Father Timothy Gallagher's books, but also you can go to my podcast called This Is How I Pray. So I did a whole podcast on an extended version of how I do it and what I do and my approach to it. So otherwise, I'm just going to jump right in. This is the fourth Sunday in Ordinary Time. We're heading into Lent here, but we have a couple Sundays in Ordinary Time before we get into Lent. Today's Gospel is from the Gospel of Mark, chapter 1, verses 21 through 28. So this is immediately following, but if you have a study Bible, you'll probably see it's usually good to read the beginning of that study Bible to read a little bit about the author and who the audience is. I find this very helpful. For example, the Gospel of Matthew, you're going to hear a lot of the word fulfilled. And Jesus is fulfilling. Jesus is completing. Jesus is doing a lot of these Jewish customs, but he is fulfilling them. So he is the Lamb of the Passover. He becomes the Lamb and the offerer of the Passover. He becomes priest and victim. And this, because Matthew is writing to a Jewish audience, he's trying to convince them that Jesus is the Messiah, the one they've been waiting for, and that he has fulfilled all of these Jewish promises. And then, for example, today, the Gospel of Mark is written for the Romans. And so it's also it's a little bit fast-paced. It's trying to show who Jesus is in a concise way. I think it's actually the shortest gospel. It's trying to show Jesus in a concise way, so it actually moves quite quickly. And it's maybe not as chronologically accurate. There's a little bit of jumping around, or there's some storytelling there in between. Unlike Matthew, who's really trying to give you the whole picture, the absolute whole picture. And then, as some of you know, Luke is my favorite gospel, has a lot of these canticles and diving into some of the stories of who these people are. In some ways, I think Luke is the best for this style of prayer because he gives a little bit more of character development. But we're going to dive into that today. Today is Mark 1, 21 through 28, and we're going to hear about Jesus going into the synagogue, healing a person who is possessed by the enemy, an unclean spirit, they call it. And Jesus, this seems to be at the beginning of his ministry, and people are kind of wondering who this person is. They're getting an inkling that he is not like an ordinary rabbi, and And so I want to paint that picture a little bit for you, because it's really easy for us to see Jesus as who we see Jesus as, God, that he rose from the dead and ascended back into heaven. But the people of these stories, they don't know who he is. They might actually have known him from a past life. We hear in the gospel, we know your dad. We know Joseph. You're the carpenter's son. We know where you grew up. There's a different understanding of who he is, and especially at the beginning of his ministry. These people been going to synagogue for a long time, and they're hearing maybe new preachers or a new rabbi, a new teacher come in, and then there's something that strikes them. So I encourage you maybe to even be one of those people who are listening to that and observing this, hearing lots of different preachers, and then Jesus comes in. What strikes you about him? What is different about him? What is out of the ordinary? It's so easy to see Jesus as we know him now, in retrospect, after we know all of this, after we know the whole story. But for him to heal someone who has been possessed by an unclean spirit, that would have been a power that hadn't been seen before. For us, it's like, yeah, of course he can do that. He's God. He is all powerful. He can do whatever is necessary, and he can do anything, really. So it's easy for us to look back and say, okay, yeah, so he cleansed a man that was unclean. Okay, but maybe even being that person too. I don't know. It might be a little bit hard to imagine being that person. But Ignatius really tries to ask us to try to enter into the story as much as possible. So maybe even today, I just encourage you to be one of the people in the synagogue and watching and listening. What strikes you? What tugs at your heart? What is said that is interesting or you want to dive deeper into? And really give yourself, and really imagine that you're there. Ignatius asks us at the beginning of all prayer to use our imagination in this contemplative prayer to imagine how God looks on us with love. So we do that to start. It's kind of funny. I always think that I'm ready to pray, and then I do that exercise, and I realize now I'm ready, and I wasn't before. I was getting myself ready by my own standards, and then I do that small little exercise to imagine Jesus looking on me with love, and it changes my heart, it changes my perspective. It softens I can feel it softening my heart. And then I think maybe I should do this. Maybe I should do this more than just praying. Waking up, imagining Jesus gazing upon me with love. Be a good exercise. Again, Gospel of Mark, chapter 1, verses 21 through 28. And I encourage you to try to start to imagine this story as you're observing it. Then they came to Capernaum, and on the Sabbath, Jesus entered the synagogue and taught. So they would be Jesus and his disciples. The people were astonished at his teaching, for he taught them as one having authority, and not as the scribes. In their synagogue was a man with an unclean spirit. He cried out, "What have you to do with us, Jesus of Nazareth? Have you come to destroy us? I know who you are, the Holy One of God." Jesus rebuked him and said, "Quiet, come out of him." The unclean spirit convulsed him, and with a loud cry came out of him. All were amazed All were amazed and asked one another, "What is this? A new teaching with authority? He commands even the unclean spirits, and they obey him." His fame spread everywhere throughout the whole region of Galilee. I encourage you, especially these stories, sometimes it's really easy to kind of water down the gospel. And part of that is natural, and we read it in a church, and it's not acted out, We don't have readers that go all in. And I don't encourage that because it can be quite distracting. However, imagining it in your own prayer, this was an extraordinary event. It's so easy. I just find, maybe you guys don't find it this way, but I find it so easy to just kind of whitewash this whole story and just try to, what's the meaning of this? But just imagine being there. Jesus comes in with his disciples, and the word they use is astonished. When's the last time you were astonished by something? Like truly astonished by something. My first thought is like some type of maybe a magic trick or a physical feat. Like, wow, I can't believe he did that or she did that. Wow, that was an amazing move. Or how did they do that trick? Astonished. Don't water that down. These people were astonished at his teaching, for he taught them as one having authority. And then don't let this line pass over you. And not as the scribes who were the teachers. So they're drawing a pretty clear line here. These scribes who were the teachers seem to not have this same authority. And maybe they only realized it. I'm imagining sitting there and only realizing Jesus is teaching with authority because now I finally see someone teaching with authority. I probably didn't think that the scribes didn't have authority before because I would have certainly thought they did. But then when someone comes in and totally blows your mind, it changes all your categories. It changes everything. At least it's changing them for me, just thinking about it. Someone comes in, Jesus comes in with this teaching, and it's astonishing. So much so that it changes the categories of what I think someone teaching with authority even means. This is totally different now. And then I'm able to draw this distinction. This is not like the scribes. Oh, I thought they had authority, and they don't. Not what I thought. Not the way I thought they did. And then he goes even further. In their synagogue was a man with an unclean spirit. He cried out. Not just like, oh, hey, what have you to do with us, Jesus of Nazareth? No, I doubt that's what it was. I doubt it. I'm sure this was quite a maybe a guttural cry. What have you to do with us, Jesus of Nazareth? I know who you are, the Holy One of God. Oh, I know who you are. Imagine being there. Had this guy yelled out before? And all of a sudden he yells out, I know who you are. Because Jesus is new, right? Then they came to Capernaum, and the Sabbath Jesus entered the synagogue and teaches. He's new. And this guy knows who he is? And you're thinking, what do you mean he knows who he is? How does he know who he is? And he knows who he is because the unclean spirit knows who he is. And you're like, why does the unclean spirit know who Jesus is? You don't even know who Jesus is. Why does the unclean spirit know who this guy is? Why does the unclean spirit know this guy? This is all of a sudden it's just like, wow, this guy has authority. All of a sudden, why does this unclean spirit know who Jesus is? I don't even know who Jesus is. And it's probably pretty clear that it's the unclean spirit and not the man possessed by the unclean spirit. Because he's screaming out, what have you to do with us? Have you come to destroy us? The man's not speaking in plural here. There's demons, unclean spirits, multiple unclean spirits within him. It's very clear to the people, I would imagine, I'm imagining, it's very clear to them that this is not the man, but the spirit saying this. They know this Jesus. So this seems to be on me, at least I'm seeing this as he's on a whole different level. This guy's teaching with authority, but also these spirits know him. And then they declare who he is, the Holy One of God. And then he says to them, quiet. You're going to see this theme quite a bit if you're listening to the Gospel of Mark. Gospel of Mark has this, Jesus trying to be secretive. I don't know. There's a lot of theories of why he did that. We won't get into that today because it's not an exegesis. It's not a Bible study. It's imagination. We're using our imagination. It's contemplative. Okay. So clearly, this spirit calls out from this guy, you're the Holy One of God. And then Jesus has the power that they were referring to earlier, not just authority, but also the power to cast him out of the man. And all were amazed and asked one another, what is this? I mean, right? They're imagining, what is this? What's going on here? Who is this guy? Spirits know him. Unclean spirits know him. I mean, maybe you're thinking he's a devil. I mean, that's what he's accused of later, right? And you can kind of see why. I can see why. That might be a thought that goes through my head. Like, who is this guy? Unclean spirits know who he is. Huh. That's weird. But also that unclean spirit said, have you come to destroy us? Huh. So he's against you. Huh. And he's the Holy One of God. The Holy One of God. And then people look around, and I can imagine I'm the one looking around saying, what is this? A new teaching with authority and power? I'm adding power. And then they say he commands even unclean spirits and they obey him? I can imagine this man has probably been possessed for a long time. And people might have tried to do prayers or deliverance with him and nothing has worked. And all of a sudden Jesus comes in and they know who he is. They declare he's the Son of God. What have you come here for? To destroy us? And then I'm looking around thinking, what is going on? Like, what? Imagine this is happening to people that are literally just showing up for synagogue, for the Sabbath prayers. Right? They're just showing up. Like, hey, we're here on Sunday, got the kids ready, and all of a sudden Jesus comes in, teaching with authority that it blows your categories. So much so that you think the scribes don't even have authority anymore, because this is a whole different level. The unclean spirits know him. I mean, just imagine this whole thing playing out. It's so easy to kind of gloss over the craziness of this story. Oh, he goes into the synagogue, and we've heard the story so many times too that it's easy to do that as well. Don't do that. This is one of the benefits of Ignatian prayer, is it doesn't allow us to gloss over or whitewash the gospel. The gospel really comes alive. The people come alive. The craziness of this story comes alive. The incredible nature of Jesus comes alive, so much more than when we've heard it 100 times. And Jesus did that. And yeah, that's because he's God and everything. But imagine being the people that didn't know him from Adam. And then he comes in and starts working miracles in front of you. He starts cleansing people from unclean spirits, which have never been done before. This hasn't been done before. People have been possessed. There's no indication that this is happening before, because they're saying, what is this power that he has even to heal or cast out unclean spirits? What is this? And then his fame spread because these people are amazed, and they started telling this story. Hey, guess what? I went to church this week, and you wouldn't believe what happened. Bob, who had an unclean spirit for 5 years or however long, this preacher cast it out, and it was gone. And guess what? The unclean spirit knew who he was and said he was the Holy One of God. And you wouldn't believe the authority that this man taught with. So much so that I don't even think that the scribes have this same level of authority. I don't even know if they have any authority at all anymore. Imagine those stories that are happening after this passage. It's no wonder that the message of his coming and his preaching spreads. It's so easy to kind of whitewash it and just think, that's interesting, and Jesus' story spread, and it was like a good marketing campaign. I don't know, but this is changing lives. Showing up for synagogue and seeing these extraordinary events that people were astonished and amazed, and they spread the word. I just hope that these messages do astonish you and amaze you, and you spread the word instead of it just being kind of nice. Oh, this is nice. Jesus has the power to cleanse my sins. That's great. That's so good for me. But did he shake you out of your boots a little bit? Did it freak you out a little? Did it make you question everything? I think that's what Jesus does, and I think that's what he might need to do in my own heart as I'm imagining this happen. This is so wonderful. This is why I love this Ignatian prayer, because when I first read this passage, I thought this might be a little difficult to enter into and to imagine. This seems just like a story I've heard so many times, and you really enter into the place of the people, and you start to realize how extraordinary these stories are, how amazing they really were. To see Jesus come into the synagogue, you've never seen him before, cleansing someone who's never known him before. The Spirit within him knows him, calls him by name, calls him the Son of God. He casts him out, and you're just watching it all in amazement and thinking to yourself and talking to your neighbor, what is this? A new teaching? A new authority? A new power? Who is this man? And start to allow him to change your life. I didn't think I'd get so fired up at this podcast, but I'm glad I did. Praise the Lord. Thank you, Jesus. If you like this, please share it with others. Spread the word and like it, give it a review. It just helps other people see it, because if you found some benefit from it, I think some other people might as well. And please pray for me. I'm praying for you. God bless. Bye-bye.